In the year 2001, four guys from Ajax, Ontario became the face of a youth movement. With baggy shorts, spiked hair, and a bunch of punk rock riffs, Sum 41 captured the chaotic energy of the new millennium. They were pretty much the poster boys for fun-loving juvenile pop punk, a band that seemed more concerned with diving boards and water guns than, well, anything else. But how did these kids from a small Canadian town become the new kings of pop punk seemingly overnight? This is the story of All Killer No Filler, an album that perfectly captured a moment in time and launched a young Canadian band into global stardom. Before we get started, be sure to hit the bell notification icon and put all notifications on. I hear from a lot of my subscribers that they don't even get notifications when I post my videos. In 2001, pop punk wasn't just a genre, it was everywhere. It was all over the charts, it was the soundtrack to teen movies, and the videos were constantly on MTV's Total Request Live. Bands like The Offspring, Blink-182, and Green Day had already proven that 3 chords and a bad attitude could lead to massive success. The world was ready for the next big pop punk band. Sum 41 would end up forming in 1996 in Ajax, Ontario, with frontman and guitarist Deryck Whibley, guitarist Dave Brownsound Baksh, Cone on bass, and Steve-O on drums. Before setting on that lineup, they went through a lot of members and were originally called Casper. Their name was chosen because they formed on the 41st day of their summer vacation. Growing up in Ajax, Ontario, about a half-hour train ride from Toronto, the members referred to their hometown as boring with no real downtown. As a result, the members frequently found themselves driving to Toronto, hanging out in the city's downtown area. For frontman Deryck Whibley, he first got introduced to punk music when he was just 14 through Sex Pistols. It was thanks to a friend of his mom's who gave Deryck their vinyl collection that he was exposed to punk rock. Mixed in with Sex Pistols was Jimi Hendrix and Led Zeppelin records too. It was in high school that the members got into snowboarding and extreme sports, and it was while searching out videos for these sports that they discovered a lot of punk bands who provided the soundtracks for these releases. Whibley and Steve-O ended up starting Sum 41 at the age of 16, and then they added the remaining elements, including Dave and Cone, who were playing in rival high school bands like Embodiment and Lizard Tongue. Deryck told the Toronto Sun, "In grade 9, we were all in different bands like rival high school bands, and then we got together to form one super band." Dave had met Deryck when the pair got kicked out of a class in high school together. Dave met Steve-O outside of a convenience store where the drummer was smoking pot. But getting Dave to join took time as he was more into metal than punk. The band also credited the Vans Warped Tour for turning them into punks. Deryck told the Kansas City Star, "When the Warped Tour came through our town, that really turned us onto punk. We never really listened to the stuff that popular kids did in high school." With their lineup in tow, Sum 41 spent about 4 years honing their sound, playing shows where they did a bunch of original songs, but they also did covers from their favorite bands like NoFX and Pennywise. The band became friends with Treble Charger frontman Greg Norrie, who agreed to manage the group starting in the early days, and he would manage them all the way through their third release, Chuck. Greg played a really important role in the band's early history, but he also brought a lot of darkness to the group and misery, according to Deryck's biography. Greg was really instrumental in teaching Deryck how to become a better songwriter, and he would play Deryck songs like Changes by David Bowie or This Is a Call by Foo Fighters and explain why those songs worked. He pushed Deryck to write catchier songs with better choruses. The band also became friends with a guy named Mark Costanzo, who was part of a group called Len, who you might remember from the late 90s with their massive hit Steal My Sunshine. Fun fact you guys may not know is I've done a whole video on that group. The link is down below. Now, Mark Costanzo would later go on to work with EMI Publishing, who ended up signing Deryck when he was just 17. In their early days, Sum 41 didn't really have a demo tape in a traditional sense. Instead, in 1999, they had an electronic press kit that they put together, which was a videotape that showed the members doing some juvenile pranks around town, like spraying passerbyers with super soaker guns and carrying out a masked heist on a pizza joint. While all this mayhem was going on, they would have their music playing in the background, and they sent that out to record labels across Canada. The problem was no one in the music industry in Canada was interested in them except for one label. Universal Music Canada not only turned down the band, they also told them they were one of the worst bands they'd ever heard. The only label who showed any interest in signing Sum 41 was a small independent French company named Aquarius Records, who were best known for putting out Corey Hart's song Sunglasses at Night. The band ended up rejecting their offer despite being flattered because they wanted to sign with a major. The band then sent that same electronic press kit out to American labels, and within a week, a ton of labels down south wanted to sign the group. The band soon set up a residency at a bar in Toronto where they would play every Wednesday, where the labels could stop by and check them out. According to Deryck, he thought the tape connected with so many labels down south, stating, "I think it reminded people of what it was like when they were young." So every American label who showed interest in Sum 41 ended up giving them an offer. Now, by this point, the group had a lawyer, they had a manager like I mentioned, and they also had a publishing deal. The advice they got from their manager and lawyer was that all of the deals they were presented were good. Now they just needed to choose a label. The band spent weeks getting free dinners, drinks, as well as trips to the strip club, and in one case, free New York Knicks tickets on the floor, where they were seated next to model Tyra Banks. They tried to chat her up, but her security guard wasn't having any of it. The band initially intended to sign with Jimmy Iovine's team at Interscope. But Island Records was the last label to come on board, and they wouldn't take no for an answer. The members really liked the people at Island Records, and so they signed with them instead. Sum 41 signed a $3.5 million deal with Island Records, which according to Deryck was the biggest deal for any Canadian band at the time. So Sum 41 got a $600,000 advance of their $3.5 million, but they weren't necessarily rolling in cash. He broke it down in his book, stating that they had to pay 30% of that amount to their manager and to their lawyer. They ended up spending $180,000 doing that. Then they had to pay for recording their first two releases, which was an EP and an LP, which cost about $250,000. Then they had to pay their producers, which was about $100,000, leaving about $70,000 for them to split amongst the four of them. The Canadian label Aquarius, who had previously offered them a deal, would end up handling distribution in Canada. It was Sum 41's way of saying thank you to the team at Aquarius for believing in them early on in their career. The band, who was proudly Canadian, wanted to record their first release in Toronto, which they did. They issued their debut EP, Half Hour of Power, in June of 2000. The record was produced by their manager, Greg Nuri, and by this point, the band had written about half of the songs that would find their way onto their first LP. The idea was to put out this EP, Half Hour of Power, and tour behind it, supporting groups like Social Distortion, and this time on the road would give Deryck the time he needed to finish off the other half of their debut album. The lone single from Half Hour of Power, Makes No Difference, ended up becoming a modest hit, peaking at number 26 in Canada on the rock chart and number 32 on the alternative airplay chart in the States. As for the video for Makes No Difference, it was inspired by a real high school party held at Steve-O's house while his parents were away for the weekend. It was said to be one of the biggest parties held in their hometown of Ajax. As attention turned to recording Sum 41's first full-length album, Island gave the band a list of producers to consider, and one of them was Jerry Finn, who had famously worked with Blink-182 and Green Day. Now, while Sum 41's members were huge fans of the albums he had worked on, they initially envisioned self-producing their first record or working with somebody nobody had ever heard of. It wasn't until they took a meeting with Jerry that they hit it off with him, and he came on board to produce their debut LP, titled All Killer No Filler. But the sessions were, well, turbulent to say the least. Deryck wrote in his book, "As the recording process stretched on, we started to show up in the studio later and later, doing a little less work each day, and getting mushrooms or ecstasy delivered there. We weren't a good influence on Jerry, and he wasn't a good influence on us either, and he went along with us when we would leave the studio early to get more at strip clubs or at his apartment. Soon enough, the label people from Island showed up expecting to listen to the finished album, only to discover that the band had only done about 5 or 6 tracks. They were understandably upset, screaming at the band, stating, 'Who the f*** do you think you are? This is your first record. You haven't even sold a single album yet. You guys still have something to prove, not something to lose. Do you know how much money you've wasted already?' The label was also super unhappy with the fact that the band had significantly changed some of the songs from their demo tape, most notably the track In Too Deep. That was the first song Island latched onto, thinking it could be a single. But as Deryck admitted in his book, he didn't stand his ground, not feeling confident enough yet as a songwriter, and gave in to the label's demands. Released on May 8, 2001, All Killer No Filler was a perfect distillation of everything the pop-punk genre had been building towards. High energy, catchy, and not taking itself too seriously. The album's sound was a mix of skate punk speed, pop hooks, and some metal-inspired guitar work, mostly thanks to Dave. Lyrically, it was written for the bored suburban teenager with themes of apathy, frustration with parents, and just wanting to have fun. As for the album title, All Killer No Filler, the band admitted they don't like overly long records, with the exception of Metallica's And Justice for All, wanting to keep their albums up until this point relatively short. Hence the name, and that's why the album clocked in around the half-hour mark. The title was a pretty bold claim, but the band would spend the next year proving it. The album's lead single, Fat Lip, was a song that carried Sum 41 into the mainstream. It was a strange and brilliant mix of punk rock choruses, rap verses that were inspired by Beastie Boys, and Fat Lip was the last song that Deryck wrote for the album. At the time, he had called the track punk hop, but he was afraid to play the demo for anyone, not knowing how it would be received. But one day when he was in the studio with Jerry Finn, he played it for the producer. He recalled in his book, "The second the song ended, he turned to me and said, 'That is the best thing you've ever written. It is a smash, and it needs to be the first single.'" I was relieved because I felt the response could have gone either way, but it still needed a lot of work and we were running short on it.
The idea for Fat Lip had been in my head for a long time. I didn't know how it was going to sound. I just knew that I wanted to do something like that. And I had tried working on it over a couple years. I think from when I was about 17 is when I sort of first had the idea to do a song like Fat Lip. And it never really came to. And then even once I started writing Fat Lip as the song we know now, that song took about a year and a half to complete. Whoa. Because I only wrote little bits of it at a time, and then I would be stumped. And I would just kind of put it down, and I wouldn't touch it for like 6 months. And then I'd pick it back up, and I would get a little bit further. All of a sudden, I have a chorus now. Oh, okay, great. And then I'm like, well, it needs a bridge or something. But that was like another 4 months later, I wrote that. So it just kind of came in pieces.
Wow, so you have a lot of patience when it comes to songwriting, it sounds like.
Sometimes.
If you don't get it right away, you'll be like, I'll come back to this.
If it's showing some promise. There's a lot of stuff I write where I just let it go. You know, it's not that good. I'll work on it for a minute, and if it's not happening, I'll never touch it again. But for some reason, the first thing I wrote for Fat Lip was the riff, the intro riff, and I knew I liked that. Yes. Then I wrote the verse guitar riff, and I knew I liked that. A lot of times I'm writing stuff that I don't think is for a song. Like when I wrote the Fat Lip chorus, I just wrote a chorus one day, and I go, oh, that will work with that thing I'm trying to work on, this, which we were calling at the time punk hop.
Okay.
And it was like this, and I was like, that'll work for my punk hop song. So I put that together, and sure enough, it worked.
The fast chorus was inspired by Elvis Costello's song No Action, while the El Nino line was inspired by a sketch that Chris Farley was in on Saturday Night Live. The song got a heavy boost when it was featured in the 2001 summer comedy American Pie 2, and as a kid, I remember hearing it on NHL 2002 as well. The video for Fat Lip would be inspired by rapper Nelly's video for Country Grammar, which featured the rapper and his friends that he grew up with in St. Louis. The problem was the band didn't have a ton of friends in their hometown of Ajax, but they did have a pretty big fan base in Pomona in California. So they put out a call on a local radio station that they were shooting a video, and well, the rest is history. But there was another pivotal moment around this time that greatly helped Sum 41's career. MTV was celebrating its 20th anniversary, and Sum 41 performed at that show, doing some originals and some covers. Performing with them on stage that night was Tommy Lee and Rob Halford. They'd also asked Slash to join them, but he said no. It was following that performance that things seemed to explode for them. MTV caught onto the Fat Lip video, and radio soon followed. Fat Lip hit #1 on the Billboard Modern Rock Tracks chart, becoming a huge anthem that summer and the band's most successful single to date. It was also a crossover hit, peaking at number 66 on the Hot 100 chart. Another big song off the record was the second single, In Too Deep, which was written in the band's early days. Deryck was at home one day waiting for Dave to pick him up to go to downtown Toronto, and Dave was super late as usual. Deryck was fooling around on his guitar and wrote In Too Deep in about 10 minutes. The original composition that Deryck came up with was a combination of pop punk and reggae. Canadian artist Snow, who you might remember from his 90s hit Informer, originally sang on the demo, but that soon morphed over time. The lyrics were inspired by a relationship Deryck had been in the 10th grade that made him never want to have a girlfriend again. In Too Deep ended up peaking at number 10 in the States on the alternative chart. And the group also had a third single with Motivation, which was a modest hit, which peaked at number 24 on the same chart. Another notable song off the record is the fan favorite Pain for Pleasure, which is one of the few songs that wasn't written solely by Deryck. Dave and Steve-O came up with a bulk of the song. Dave came up with that metal riff while Steve-O overheard it while walking to the bathroom. He ended up writing the lyrics while he was on the toilet listening to the riff. The success was huge and immediate. Fueled by singles like Fat Lip and In Too Deep as well as Motivation, All Killer No Filler became a commercial giant. The album peaked at number 13 on the US Billboard 200 chart and stayed on the chart for 49 weeks. It was certified triple platinum in Canada and platinum in both the US as well as the UK. Sum 41 became MTV favorites, with their prank-filled videos becoming a regular feature on TRL. They backed it all up with a massive touring schedule, playing over 300 shows in 2001 alone, which included a spot on the Vans Warped and Campus Invasion tours. According to the Star Press, Rolling Stone's readers poll of 2001 saw their readers choose In Too Deep over U2's Elevation for Video of the Year. They actually took home every award from both Rolling Stone and Spin Magazine for every category they were nominated in. Steve-O told the Oakland Tribune, best dress band, Sum 41, I don't change my pants for the entire tour. The tour for All Killer No Filler concluded in May of 2002. Deryck recalled, while our album had gone multi-platinum worldwide, we weren't seeing much more than a dime. That's because we had to reimburse the label for the studio time, the music videos, and the tour support they provided us. It would be years before we'd see any of that money trickle down to us. We had a little bit of walking around money thanks to touring nonstop, but there was no way I could afford my own place. Sum 41 had taken over the world by just being rebellious kids. They had perfected the pop-punk formula, but as quickly as they mastered that sound, they were already getting ready to change it completely. And maybe part of that doing was their manager. Deryck wrote in his book, I could feel Greg becoming jealous of our band's success even though he had helped us find it, and as our manager benefited from it. He never showed it with the rest of the band, but with me in private, he seemed angrier in general now. Their manager's attitude towards the sound that made Sum 41 famous started to turn negative. He told Deryck All Killer No Filler was kids' music, something that offended the frontman, but at the same time, as the band was on the road promoting that record, he was stockpiling riffs that were far more darker and evolved than their debut album. Also adding to the tension was that their manager took a lion's share of the publishing money on their debut album. This was a problem that continued onto their subsequent album. Let me know in the comments section, guys, if you want me to continue the story of Sum 41. That does it for today's video. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you again in Rock Roll True Stories. Take care.